quarterly update webinar for Tuesday, April the 28th. We're so glad to see everyone here, and we are eager to share with you some of the information we have as well as our special guest speaker. Our agenda is coming up on the screen, as you can see. We're going to start with a welcome, and then we're going to move into our professional learning focus, which is conducting a DLI program evaluation in a school or district. We have here with us Dr. Emily Bivens to talk about that and give you her perspective about using the guiding principles for dual language education when conducting a DLI program evaluation.
Hi, everybody.
After that, we'll talk about some upcoming professional development that's specialized for our North Carolina DLI community. And then we have some updates to share with you from a state, regional, and national perspective. And then we'll finish out with some reminders as well as our contact information and the website where everything can be found. By the way, my name is Anne Marie Gunter. I'm the World Languages Consultant at the Department of Public Instruction and the co-lead on the DLI team. Behind the scenes is my colleague, and I'll let her introduce herself.
Hi, this is Ivana Manthor-Anderson, one of the ESL Title III consultants here at NCDPI and the other co-lead for DLI at NCDPI.
All right, well, let's get started. And as we begin, we always like to check that you have full control of your control panel. Up on the right-hand side of the screen, you see probably what your control panel looks like. It may look a little bit different depending on the browser you chose today or the device that you're logged in on. But our default audio is computer audio. You see that. And by the way, if you can't see your control panel, it's probably just minimized on your screen. So look for the go-to icon and you can click on that and see it again. But we're on computer audio and everyone is on mute because we are recording this broadcast. If you're ever having trouble with audio, you can go from computer audio to phone call and back to computer audio, and that should reset your audio and fix things. Also, we have a little hand icon on the control panel, which we sometimes use to take questions or to do a sound check. We just did a sound check, but let's do a quick one again. Raise your hand if you've been hearing me broadcast this information and talk about the agenda and all of those things. All right, great. And finally, the questions box. You can type things into the questions box at any time. Both Ivana and I will see them. And one of the things we like to do is make sure we understand your question and decide if we should answer it individually, which we can do behind the scenes, or if it's a question we should save and answer for everyone at some point during the presentation. So we will take a look at that and always be asking and making sure we're checking it. As I said, the recording of this meeting will be shared and it will be posted approximately 1 week from today. Sometimes we get it posted a little sooner on the DLI website, but we have the 1 week guarantee for everyone. We also post the materials like the slides you're going to see today and any links and handouts that are relevant to our work together. So let's get started. Another thing we like to do during our broadcast is to use the poll feature of GoTo. It's an audience response system. And of course, as with any type of professional development, we want to know what your goals are with learning today. So what are your goals with today's webinar? You can check all that apply to you. And you see there's 5 different options. You may be a teacher leader sharing information with colleagues. You could be an administrator gathering materials for your local presentations. You could be an educator earning a contact hour for license or renewal. You could be an individual getting a question answered, or you could just be anonymous who needed or wanted a break on a Tuesday afternoon from one of the other things that you were busy doing. So Ivana is running the poll question. Please go ahead and click on the screen to indicate your answers. And as I indicated, it's a check all that apply for you.
So about 60% of you have voted. So we hope to get a little bit higher number. If you don't mind, please take a moment and vote. We'll give it about 20 more seconds. About 5 more seconds. And so you should see on your screen the results.
And it looks like over half of you, 63%, are an educator earning a contact hour for licensure today. And that's always good to hear. I know it's important to keep up your professional learning as we go through. Please keep in mind, those of you who are earning a contact hour, you will receive an email receipt and a certificate with your information documented. Please keep that email receipt and certificate to use in your own district or charter school, and you may need to get approval to use that for your professional development hours. Also, earning that certificate requires that you actively participate throughout the webinar, because we only give certificates to those who are actively participating and attend the live broadcast. We do, as I said, though, post the materials later if you want to use them locally and get your own contact hours through those means.
And before I do hide that, sorry, I just wanted to say we did have some that actually answered the question in the question box. So please know that when we put a poll up, you actually vote by clicking on the boxes on the screen. Everyone should have access to actually clicking on the screen rather than adding it into the chat box.
That is an important point. Also, over half of you had indicated on the poll that you are a teacher leader sharing information with colleagues, which is great. Always good to share the information you learn. About 20% of you are either an administrator gathering materials for local presentations or an individual getting a question answered. And a few of you said you are kind of anonymous and just need a break on a Tuesday afternoon. We certainly understand that. Again, thank you for joining us, and it's good to know what your goals are with today's broadcast. With that, we'll move into our professional learning focus about conducting a DLI program evaluation in a school or district. As I said, Dr. Emily Bivens is here with us. She is a principal in Chapel Hill Carbo City Schools. She's also associated with the East Carolina University DLI Administrator Certificate Program. I will let her take it away. Emily?
Thanks so much, Anne Marie. It's nice to be with everybody today. I hope everyone is surviving well and staying safe at home and making really creative ways to connect with their kids. Today, I'm going to talk about a process that we've used in my school and my school district related to using the guiding principles tools for doing an evaluation of your dual language program, either at the school or the district level. Let's see. I'm trying to forward my slide here. Got it. Okay, our expected outcomes today. Let's see. Anne Marie, I'm not getting everything on my screen.
I think there might have been some animations on this slide originally. So if you go ahead and click, they should come up one at a time.
There we go. All right, so our expected outcomes today are to understand how to use the guiding principles to self-assess a school's progress towards a quality dual language program, to contribute ideas for how schools might use this process, to locate the resources from the Center for Applied Linguistics, or CAL, and then to perform data analysis based on this self-assessment. And so I'm going to walk through all of these processes today. So I want to start here with this image. This is an image of the Lambeth at the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C. And this is an important place for me personally because this is where I feel like my dual language journey began. And my teachers, when we attended a conference there that was sponsored by the Center for Applied Linguistics and the Illinois Resource Center, it was kind of a dual language 101 course that really gave us the foundational pieces in dual language. And for me, that was about 15 years ago. And in visiting this cathedral as kind of an afternoon journey, the teachers were making analogies to our journey in dual language as a school, and felt like that quality dual language instruction is a journey. It's not a destination. You never fully arrive. And I think that's just important to remember as we go through the continuous improvement process, that dual language is indeed a journey. It is not a destination. So we're going to do a poll question here. I'd like to get started with finding out your level of familiarity with the third edition of the Guiding Principles that just came out just a year ago. And, you know, you can see the responses there of not even knowing what the Guiding Principles are. You've heard of the Guiding Principles. You were familiar with earlier editions of the Guiding Principles, and you've read and are familiar with the third edition, or you're the expert. So let's load that poll and give everybody an opportunity to click within the blue blocks on your screen to respond to that poll. And we'll give everybody, you know, about 15 seconds, 30 seconds to respond to the poll and figure out where everyone is in knowing the third edition of the Guiding Principles for Dual Language. So, Ivana, are we getting some responses in there?
We've got 76% that have voted at this point.
Okay.
Just let me know when you want me to close it.
We'll wait just a few more seconds. All right, let's go ahead and close that and check on those results. All right, so we're pretty evenly dispersed. So maybe our other expert can chime in and help, because I'd love some company here. So some of you guys aren't familiar with the Guiding Principles. Some of you have heard of them, and some of you were familiar with the earlier editions, and some of you are familiar with the third edition. I think the really exciting thing about the Guiding Principles for Dual Language is that this really is a foundational piece for us in determining quality. Some of the best researchers and thinkers in dual language education came together to create and craft the original Guiding Principles that were, you know, obviously based on the best and current research at the time, and standards for quality dual language program. And when I first became a dual language administrator, I didn't even know what the Guiding Principles were, didn't have a clue. And so I have definitely used the Guiding Principles as a roadmap in my 15-year dual language journey. So let's exit out of the poll, and we'll continue on here. All right, so that's a picture of the Guiding Principles. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my journey with the third edition of the Guiding Principles and how I came to learn about them, and some of the things that I did personally that then launched what I ended up doing with my school and with my district. So the year that the Guiding Principles were to be released, La Cosecha, which is one of the big national conferences for dual language education, it's sponsored by Dual Language of New Mexico in November of each year. And at the La Cosecha conference, there are lots of amazing networking opportunities and lots of really great professional learning. But one of the sessions that I attended was a session on the revised Guiding Principles. And during that session, the presenters did an overview and an unpacking of those Guiding Principles and talked about how they were reorganized, the differences in, you know, the research that we had from the first and second editions to where we are now. And it really allowed us to take a look into what do we know about dual language learning today, not what did we know 5, 10 years ago in the earlier editions of Guiding Principles, but what do we know today, and how have we reorganized those standards for quality dual language instruction. So that was my initial introduction. As soon as the presentation was over, I had downloaded my free copy, and I think there's a link a little later in the presentation where you can log into the Center for Applied Linguistics or go to their website and download your own free copy of it. You can also order a print copy of it, and I think it's about $30, but downloading it is free, and you can download it as many times as you want to, but the Center for Applied Linguistics does ask you to register when you download, so they know, you know, how many copies are being downloaded. They also ask that you, if you're going to use it for other purposes, that you seek permission from the Center for Applied Linguistics, which yeah, I'm sure we all would do. After I downloaded my copy, I then had multiple readings. And I think anytime we become familiar with a set of standards, whether, you know, when we were all first introduced to, you know, Common Core or, you know, state standard changes, you know, changes in standards for, you know, our program area or content area for social emotional learning, any sort of standards document, having multiple readings is is what we would expect students to do, and we expect teachers to do and administrators to do, so that we get really deep understanding. So I read through the guiding principles with multiple readings, and then I highlighted changes and made notes to myself about what was new to me. And some of the, the changes in the guiding principles were around, the order of the guiding principles themselves, or things that stood out for me personally, and then the role of technology in 21st century learning, and some of the nuances around how we use language. And what I mean by that is, there used to be a very clear definition of, in my case, it's only English time, it's only Spanish time, and there was never a commingling of the languages. And I think that the emerging research in translanguaging has really helped us to understand that there should be very intentional integration of the languages, so that students can build on their fonts of knowledge to the very best of their ability. But again, it should be very planned, intentional use of translanguaging, so that students can build on that. But that was not part of the former guiding principles. That's certainly something that was new in the emerging research that has come forward. So that's just sort of my personal journey on taking a look at the guiding principles themselves for me personally. So I would recommend that everyone, if you don't have a copy of the guiding principles, that when we wrap up or in the coming weeks, for you to download a copy, print it if that's your style, read it on your Kindle at the, by the pool this summer, or wherever you want to, so that you can really dig deep into the guiding principles. So we're going to move forward in talking about what I did next with the guiding principles. Oops, went too far. So I wanted to unpack them with my teachers and the school. And I knew that my teachers were already familiar with the second edition of the guiding principles, because we had used the second edition in a similar fashion as we used the third edition. And because of all of the initiatives in my school district, I was worried about overwhelming my teachers and having my teachers feel like that, oh my gosh, we're now going to have to change everything we're doing because these new guiding principles have come out, and we're not doing a good job, and we're just going to have to completely regroup. And I really worried about teachers being overwhelmed by that. So I wanted to be very conscientious about how we unpacked the guiding principles with teachers. So the process that I used in this unpacking was, I literally printed the entire guiding principles document. I took out all the forward information, and then I organized each of the principles by the strand. And so I clipped together the research and then the rubric for each of the strands. And so, I then set up the teams at the school across the 7 strands for the guiding principles. So I had 7 stacks of the guiding principle documents, and we took the chart paper that you can see in the picture on the slide, and we literally glued the rubric for the guiding principles on the chart paper for teachers to then assess how they felt like we were doing in each of the areas for that particular strand. But before they did that, the team had a group dialogue about their assigned guiding principle that looked at the research summary first. What did the most current research say about your strand on assessment, for example? And then after they read through the research and synthesized that as a team, they then went through the rubric itself, and they assessed where they felt like the school was. And if they couldn't reach consensus, they might check all of the indicators, which meant for us as a school that some teachers were doing an exemplary job with a standard, while other teachers weren't even demonstrating that particular standard yet. And so for us as a school, that meant that was a standard that lacked consistency across teachers and classrooms at the school. But then there were other standards where teachers certainly were consistent in saying, oh, we're partially implementing, or we're fully implementing, or we haven't even thought about that yet. And then once they went through and assessed their standards for their strand, they then took sticky notes and recorded the evidence for the strands. And you can see the sticky notes at the bottom where they recorded things that the school was already doing. Because again, I was very concerned that the teachers were going to feel like, oh, we're going to have to completely revise everything we're doing. And I wanted them to see and amplify and magnify the great things that were already happening, either in individual classrooms or in grade levels, or in pockets in the school, or holistically in the school, so that they didn't feel completely overwhelmed by that process. So we ended up with 7 pieces of chart paper, with each piece of chart paper being a strand of the guiding principles, with sticky notes on the bottom that had what we were doing as a school, to represent that, to be evidence of that particular strand. Okay. Yeah. So let's take a look at what we then did. So in this faculty meeting, as I mentioned before, we didn't want the teacher to be overwhelmed, so they brainstormed. Then we took their brainstorm maps and at a second faculty meeting, and we mapped the sticky notes that they had listed at the bottom on a world map. And I'm going to show you what I gave them before and then after, so you can see what it looks like. And we had each continent of the world representing one of the guiding principles. When we finished mapping what we were already doing as a school onto the continents, we then had a talking circle that really helped us to identify where we were anchored in the guiding principles, and being able to name specific practices in the school that were evidence of implementation of a guiding principle. And then we were able to look at connections across standards and strands within the guiding principles. So I'm going to advance through and show you what that map looks like. So this is what I gave teachers initially, and you can see the 7 strands for the guiding principles, the program structure, which really looks at your content and language allocation, are you an immersion program, are you a 50-50 program, what do your policies say, how do kids enroll, that kind of thing. And then supports and resources, really looking at leadership, resource allocation, materials that teachers are using in the classroom, that kind of thing. At the bottom, you can see staff quality and professional development. And then Africa for us represented family and community, and looking at those connections across our families and then the community from a larger perspective. And then we very intentionally connected curriculum and instruction in Eurasia, in Europe and Asia, and looking at curriculum and instruction, because we felt like those two would have many overlaps. And then assessment and accountability. And why we chose a world map, I don't know. Our leadership team was just trying to brainstorm how to help teachers visually see what they were already doing in the school related to these guiding principles. So I'm now going to advance to the next slide and show you what that looked like when teachers finished. So I'll give you a second to take a peek at that. And of course, they made funny little pictures all over it just to be entertaining for me. So you can look for, we're going to look at program structure in North America. And in program structure, we really are looking at elements of things that we had in the school. So we were talking about our biliteracy curriculum. Some of the program structures provided leadership opportunities for students, like Safety Patrol and Girls on the Run. Certainly our school improvement team was a leadership entity. The efforts that the school was doing around Black History Month and various celebrations to really support our Black students and families in feeling connected to the school fell under program structure. And then you can kind of follow your way around under support and services, and you see things listed here like health screenings that were, for us that meant they were done in both languages, and the MTSS process, how we conduct conferencing and home visits, our ConnectEd messaging system, our email messaging system, our WhatsApp, how we were connecting with families. And then you can kind of weave your way on around the rest of the world here and looking at family and community. Again, you see an overlap there with, the ConnectEd, the phone messaging, Girls on the Run, our book fair, school improvement team. Hispanic Heritage Month is the HHMC. Our big Carnival celebration, Mariposas, which is a Latino Girls Leadership Group. Kumba Arts, which is a Black student group. And then you see MTSS there also because that connects to families too. And then if you look at the bottom at Antarctica, some of the things that we layered on here were things like learning walks, conferences, meaning professional development conferences, and then of course the NESIS process in evaluation and professional development plans. And again, these are things that all of our schools have embedded in them, and your map would look different than ours, but have some of the same components. As you follow your way on around to curriculum instruction and assessment and accountability, under curriculum instruction, we had things in there like our Ames Web screeners that we were using, conferencing with students and parents, our Mariposas group, writing about reading, which is what WAR stands for. Our B3 is our after-school program. We take children on a lot of different field trips, Socratic seminars, at our F&P testing that we were using in 4th and 5th grade, our second step curriculum. And then you can follow your way on around to assessment and accountability and looking at the various elements of, COGAT testing, F&P, EOG, and then of course our school improvement team and their analysis of that testing process. The reason that I thought it was important for our staff to look at this visually is because as the principal of the school, not that any of these strands are more important than the other. They aren't. They're all very important, and they're a system. And if one piece of the system is not as strong as the other pieces, then you might have challenges in how the whole system works collectively together. And when teachers started brainstorming things that they were doing across these various strands, one thing that became very evident to us as a school is that we spent an enormous amount of time in curriculum instruction, assessment, and family and community, and a lot less time in program structure, support and resources, and really attending to staff quality and PD, or at least in our thinking about our implementation of the guiding principles. And so what that led us to wonder as a program is, were those areas of our implementation of the guiding principles that were not as strong as some of the other areas. And so after we kind of mapped everything on here, we then, as I said earlier, we had a talking circle at the end of that faculty meeting to really talk about where we felt we were anchored, and what came up for us and our visual, as well as people's feelings about the guiding principles, were our strengths in family and community outreach, and then curriculum instruction and assessment. And then the areas that we felt like we really needed to attend more closely to were being really clear around things within the program structure, and things around support and resources, and being very clear and articulate in staff quality and professional development in those strands. So after we did this map, what happened next? So let's see if I can walk you through that. So how did we take that and integrate into our school improvement plan? So
Emily,
that work, yes, we'll pause.
before you go on,
Yep.
we had one question where someone was asking you to share a little bit more background about the school where this was implemented. Is it a magnet? Is it a full school? Is it elementary? They want a little more context for the work that you're doing here.
I'm sorry, I should have given that at the very beginning. So this work was done at Frank Porter Graham Bilingue, which is in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and it is a full school two-way program, and students enter in pre-K or kindergarten, and the school has now become an immersion school. But when the school initially opened 8 years ago, it offered both a 50-50 track as well as an immersion track, and our immersion track looked like 90-10 in kindergarten, 80-20, 70-30, and then 50-50 from 3rd through 5th grade. We had done a similar process to teachers just self-assessing using the chart paper in the school where I was the principal before the magnet school, and that was a school within a school. So I think this work can be done in a full school, in a school within a school, with just dual language teachers, and then the process, obviously I'll talk about in just a few minutes, replicates itself also at a district level. Our school is also an elementary school, PK to 5. And that school has been a full magnet school now for 8 years. And the district has had dual language programs for almost 20 years now. So these are programs that are not as historic as like our Charlotte programs, but certainly have been around a long time, and should be robust in their implementation at this point. And I know the very first time I self-assessed using the guiding principles, when I first was learning about guiding principles as a new dual language principal, there were very few things that I could even check that the school was doing. And so, of course, I left that process thinking, oh, we must not be a very good dual language school. And that's not the case at all. And I don't think that's the purpose of a process like this. I think the purpose of a process like this is to identify and know what are those quality indicators, where are you right now, and where are you moving toward? And how do we become better tomorrow than we are today? And I think, again, it's not a destination, it is definitely a journey along the way. So I hope I answered that question. Okay, so I'm now going to kind of talk about what we did next. Whoops. All right, so that was with the full faculty. I didn't feel like that we could have a kind of a goal setting, priority setting with the full faculty. There's just too many people. So our school leadership team, which has, it's not our school improvement team, because that includes, in our school district, it's half parents, half teachers in the school. So we have a separate school leadership team, which is the leader of each of our grade level PLCs. And so as well as specials resource and our classified staff. So the school leadership team met, reviewed the map and the notes from all of the 7 charts that were done, and the sticky notes themselves. And we set some priorities, and that happened over several months. Our leadership team met once a month, and so one month we we set a priority or set priorities of what we wanted to focus on. The next month we brainstormed actionable steps that we wanted to take forward to our actual school improvement team, and then the next month we put those on paper with some very specific actionable steps, resources, a timeline, etc., so that then it could actually go to the school improvement team. And then when we shared it with our school improvement team, we provided them a brief overview of the process that the faculty had engaged in, that the leadership team had engaged in, and we displayed all of the standards work with our chart paper, et cetera, so that everyone around the table would know, where did this come from? Because I think it's really important so that all your stakeholders know that you are grounded in standards, and that just like many programs like IB programs or other magnet school programs, whether it's STEM, et cetera, there are standards for quality program. Dual language is no different, and this was a way to help reference people back to, here are the standards. I visited many dual language schools across our country, and I can tell you that I don't think I've ever been to a school that they've said, oh yeah, we think we have arrived. We are exemplary in implementation of every standard. I want to visit a school like that one day. Everyone says, oh, there are things we're good at, there are things we're not good at. There are things that certain teachers are good at, but not all teachers. And so in integrating this into our actual school improvement plan, of course, just like many of my colleagues around North Carolina, you probably have some guidance from your school district about what your school improvement plan has to look like, and a template, and things have to fit in certain categories. And we also are a focus school, so we're using the online system for our school improvement planning. So we had to connect everything to those systems and processes that exist, and so crafting actionable items that would go into our school improvement plan, but directly connected to and were grounded in the guiding principles, and our evaluation of where we thought we were with guiding principles was really important to us. So we then were able to present those to our school improvement team, and then the school improvement team was able to vote on those changes. And of course, in that priority setting, just like with any school improvement plan priority setting, there were things we were going to do in year 1, year 2, year 3, and then of course after 3 years, the plan would be to completely reassess and reevaluate. And from the time we initially did this process, the charting and the chart papers, they stayed up in our leadership room, and as we met to talk about our school improvement plan, then we were able to reference back to, so that we didn't forget what were those standards and priorities under strand 1 of quality program. What were those standards and priorities that we were working on related to curriculum or instruction, et cetera. So I'm going to pause here because that kind of ends the process with the school, and see if there are any other questions about the school-based process.
There are a couple of questions, but I'm not sure that they are directly connected to what you are talking about right now. If you want,
Okay.
we can hold them to the end, or I can read them and you can make that decision.
Why don't we hold on to them if they're not about the
Okay.
school process in general, and we'll try to answer them at the end. Thanks, Ivana. All right, so let's take a look at the district ideas. I am a school principal, and I have worked at the central office when I was the director of elementary instruction and professional development when dual language launched in our school district. And people across the state have heard me talk about this process, that when dual language launched in our school district as the director of elementary instruction, where dual language was going to begin in kindergarten, I was not really involved in that process. Dual language in our district began as what I'll call a special POPs program in the ESL office and world language office. And really didn't connect with our elementary programs or other programs within the school district. And so one of the things that we have learned along the way is how critical having support and grounding from both the school and the district level are related to implementation of programs, particularly if you have programs across multiple schools. If you're the only school that has a program, then you certainly need a different kind of support from your central office. But if you have multiple programs in a school system, then it becomes even more critical that there is some district collaboration, because you want schools to be progressing toward the guiding principles in a way that makes sense for you as a district in addition to the whole school. So I will share the process that our school district used in self-assessment, and then I'll share some of the action planning documents that were used along the way. So with our school district, we followed a very similar process, except we have like a dual language like planning steering group within the district, and that steering group has representatives across our multiple dual language programs, elementary, middle, high school, across our English Spanish programs, our English Mandarin programs. That steering committee also has people from the central office in various program areas, whether it's English language arts, or equity department, or human resources department, as well as administrators and teachers from the school. And then there were also parents on that steering committee. So that steering committee was pulled together and told we were going to self-assess where we think the district is related to implementation of the guiding principles. And at the time that we were using this process, it was before the third edition came out. So we were looking at the second edition. And so some of the documents you'll see are second edition specific. And that process has not been repeated in Chapel Hill since the third edition has come out. I think they're about due for that process at the district level again. But so what we did when everyone came together in the steering committee is everyone was divided into teams, very similar to the process that I described for the teachers at Frank Porter Graham, but they were across program areas, levels, and roles within the school district. So the team that looked at strand one around program structure included teachers, administrators, central office folks, parents, and it also included people that work specifically in English Spanish, English Mandarin, and then people who didn't work specifically in dual language, like human resources or the volunteer office, those kinds of folks. So they came together and they followed a very similar process. They read through the research as a group for their strand, and then they looked at the standards for their strand, and then mapped where they thought the district was. And again, similar to what the teachers had done, some people within that group would say things like, well, our department isn't using that at all. And so they would put not implemented. And then we were smart enough to get them to put a check under not implemented, but also to put who had put that. It might be the volunteer office, it might be transportation, it might be the Mandarin program, it might be, high school Spanish program, whatever it was that felt like it was not implemented or exemplary in their implementation. They made those check marks. And again, it allowed us as a district to look at pockets where there were trends and similarities across the school district, and then where there were places where we needed additional training and support, and then places where we had pockets of exemplary practice that we needed to amplify on. So that process looked very similar from the district perspective. What happened next? Let's take a peek. So here are samples of the rubric. When you print the guiding principles, or when you look towards the back of the guiding principles, well, it's not even in the back anymore. It's behind the research for each strand. You can see this is a sample rubric for strand 1, assessment and accountability, and these are the exact rubrics that came from our district's plan. So I'll just read the first one here. It says, the program has developed a data management system for tracking student data over time. And you can see the X that's marked there in not demonstrated. And then you can see that the evidence that we had that it was not yet demonstrated is that there was not a data warehouse currently, and that they were using multilingual measures and systems to track data over time, but that there wasn't some sort of repository that allowed us to look at data across languages. And so you can, again, kind of take a peek through just this, particular evidence that, people recorded here in this district process. We did these in chart paper, and then someone took the chart paper and transposed it on the actual rubric electronically. So that then there was an electronic measure. I was never that smart as a principal. We just did it on chart paper. That probably shows my age. So this is a sample from strand 1. Again, this exists for all 7 strands of dual language. And you can see where people felt like they were, and then the evidences or contrary to the evidences. So I'm going to advance to the next slide. So from this process, we then created an action plan. And again, that was a different meeting. That first meeting was just to have people go through and assess where they thought we were. And then from there, someone took the information, put it all into an electronic format, sent it back out, let everybody take a look at it. And then when people came back together, they were put back in the same team that they were in before. So if you were on the assessment team before, then we wanted you on the assessment team again, just because you had a deeper understanding of assessment and the standards for assessment related to action planning. So you can take a look at some of the action steps that we listed based on our self-assessment. So some of the tasks that we said we were going to do was to develop a data management system, K-12, a unilateral system to track progress in English and Spanish over time. And part of that process was going to include the development of a team to determine which data would be collected and how it would be managed, housed, and accessed. And it would include the WIDA information, because we knew that was an important component. And then to collect and share data with all stakeholders, and needed a process for doing that. So then you can see that the resources needed were a centralized database. The start and stop time, we hadn't determined that yet when this particular iteration was done. The testing coordinator was going to be the person responsible, as well as school administrators and district administrators overseeing programs like dual language ESL, and at the time, the RTI or MTSS process in special education. And then you can see the next one, using data to drive professional development, data meetings to determine professional development goals, and develop professional development sessions and opportunities around identified topics. And then obviously we needed time for data analysis, and school administrators were going to be working specifically on that. And then you can see the last one, looking at a protocol for learning walks for best practice, looking what we call in our district look fors and ask abouts as you visit classrooms. And again, that was going to involve our ESL teachers, content coordinators, and our dual language coordinator. So we took our self-assessment and then put it into a district action plan for dual language. And again, this action plan is probably a 20-page document, and the district's dual language coordinator was responsible for maintaining and helping us to monitor this plan. After the steering committee met initially, then they revised, continued to massage and work through this action plan, and then began the implementation of that action plan. Okay, so we're going to take another poll. So this is like a big process, and I don't want people to feel overwhelmed at all, because there have been moments and times in schools that I've worked with that have only looked at one strand and have self-assessed where they are with one strand and taken small bites of this. Others have done all 7 strands. Some have just done a read of the guiding principles and haven't done any assessment. And I think that no matter which way you begin your entry point into using the guiding principles, there are lots of ways that you can engage in that process. The process that I've described is really a self-assessment process using the standards and the rubrics within the standards, and then an action planning associated with it. So our poll now is going to be, how likely are you to use a similar process for self-assessing and action planning? Never, maybe, I'd need some help, or yes. So if you'll take a minute to respond to that poll, then we can figure out where everyone is at this time. And while you're responding to that poll, I will go ahead and make another plug. On the Center for Applied Linguistics website, there's something called the Two-Way Immersion Toolkit. And in that toolkit, some of these documents exist for some additional support and action planning. So let's say, for example, that like in our self-assessment as a district, we knew we needed to do something around data and looking at data across the two languages. So once you have identified that as a need, what do you do then? And the Two-Way Immersion Toolkit gives you some specific strategies of what you could do to address that specific need. So that's a really great resource as well, and it's free. You just download it and can use it electronically through Word, or put it into Google. I will tell you the formatting is a little squirrely, but you can certainly use it in a variety of ways. So Ivana, are we feeling like we're ready to close the poll?
We are at 81% voted, and we do have 2 write-ins. We have a yes and a maybe as the write-in.
Awesome.
And I'll show the others.
All right, so never, maybe, I need some help, and yes. Well, that is like really positive. So I think it's amazing that people are at least considering, or would like to work with other people within their school, or maybe across schools, or with their central office to get the help you need, or are ready to embark on that process. So thanks for responding to that poll. So we can close that poll out. What I'd like to do now is to take a peek at really maybe just answering some questions and sharing ideas. Before I do that, though, as you can see on this page, here's the download link to get to the Center for Applied Linguistics, and the guiding principles and the strands are program structure, curriculum, instruction, assessment. Oops. And here is the CAL website, and so we can click back over to that. When you go to the Center for Applied Linguistics website and click on it, you can see the guiding principles document there in the 3rd edition. And when you click on that and you go towards the bottom of this screen, then you can see this. Oh, wait a minute. Let's see if I can get up to that point. I'm scrolling and having my own technical difficulties. Let's see, there we go. All right, you can see where you can either order your print copy today, and again, I said it's about $30, or you can download the free digital version. And when you click on that, it will ask you for your email. So, and they want to know what your role is to feel like who is downloading and using this document and resource. So that's how you get your free copy of it, which is awesome that they offer that for free. So we'll click back over onto the presentation.
And if I could jump in for just a second.
Yep, go right ahead.
We also have a link to the Guiding Principles for Dual Language Education webpage on the DLI website, so you can always click over there and get it that way too. It is very nice that they make the PDF that you can download, and we're also going to be posting some other materials like the templates for evaluation that Dr. Bibbins was just showing you, because those are embedded in that whole PDF, and so we're going to break those out and have those available on the website. But it is important for you to get your own copy and register so that they know you're using it.
Yep. Awesome. Okay. Well, all right, so I think it would be a great time for us to maybe enter our ideas into the question box so that we can share if you've used the guiding principles, or you have some ideas for how you might take a look at the at your next steps for using the guiding principles. I think it'd be great for us to take a peek and share some of those ideas across our programs. So I guess maybe Ivana, if you can maybe glance through the questions that people are having or are posting around their ideas for using guiding principles for improving our DLI schools.
Okay, so do you want to take any of the questions that were coming as you were presenting?
Awesome.
Okay,
Yep.
So one of the questions was, can you share these documents? So I believe Anne Marie answered most of that with talking about what's in the guiding principle, but are there any documents that you've shown that you would be willing to share that came out of your specific district?
Yes, I would be happy to share any of these documents. If somebody wants to shoot me an email, I would be glad to share those with you.
Okay, and then we had a question, what database was used?
Database.
This came in about 8 minutes ago, 10 minutes ago, when you were talking about how you were analyzing different data. If the questioner wants to type a follow-up, I'll look for that in just a minute as well.
I guess I could say, one of the action items that that came out of our district a self-assessment was around using a database and a repository for data. I will tell you that our district has still not really solved that problem. I think one of the challenges in dual language, as with lots of other things, is really being able to triangulate and look across data. I will tell you our district this year is using a data tool called Performance Matters, and I will say that this has allowed us to take a look at a student profile, for example, through various assessments that are loaded in that that toolkit. And I'm not like touting that program over another one. I think there are probably lots of tools that can do this. Our district just happens to be using that particular tool. But as a principal, for example, I can download a student's literacy assessment scores from their EOG, from their their read to achieve information. I can download their information from the state assessments in reading, both beginning, middle, and end of the year, and then the assessments that we're using as a district in Spanish. So I can look across a child's profile and take a look at how are they doing in English, how are they doing in Spanish, how are they doing in formal testing measures. And that document has really allowed us to look across the two languages. And I think that other documents that we've used, anytime you log in, for example, and we take a look at math assessment, for example, we might be looking at a child's math scores and the assessments are all given in Spanish. Well, we don't really have a tool for measuring how are they doing in English math until those assessments are done in English, which if in our case would be at a different grade level. So I think that ongoing process without having to double assess kids, there are ways to do it sometimes, but it's not something that I think can happen all, we haven't figured out how to make it happen all the time. And there are not, I will just go ahead and put it out there are not tools designed specifically for dual language learners. Almost all the assessments that we use are tools that are designed for monolingual English speakers, monolingual Spanish speakers. They're not designed for kids pulling repertoire of language across, their two fonts of knowledge in the two languages. So I hope I sort of answered that.
And I do just want to say that if we don't get your question answered, all of these questions will be in a report at the end of the webinar. We will share them with Dr. Bivens, and we certainly can make sure that some of these questions are answered and then post them to the website. I do want to share a comment first, because I think this is the sentiment that many of us have, is I love the idea of this being a journey and not feeling down simply because our school has not met all of the standards. I think that we are all in a process. So I wanted to share those words of encouragement. We do have a couple of questions about time. So one question, I'm going to read you several questions. One question is, what was the time frame for the process evaluation? And then sort of in the same lines, we also had a question about, sorry, they're jumping all over the place. We had a question about how often does your team meet in order to look at the data? And then there was also one, how did you track the Spanish over time, and what assessments did you use?
Okay. So to complete this process, I will say that we worked over the course of about 6 months of the school year. And so I met with my leadership team initially in August before the school year started and said, it's time. It's been several years since we've looked at this process, and I knew that the standards were going to be coming out. So when we first began that process, we just said we're going to start this process. As soon as I got my hands on the new guiding principles, then we began the process, and really it happened after school and faculty meetings and at our leadership meetings. So we were able to do a self-assessment because my faculty was already familiar with the guiding principles in an hour and a half session after school in a faculty meeting. If I were working with a faculty that was not as familiar with the guiding principles, I might make that a two-part session where, in September, for example, I might do an overview of what are the guiding principles in general, and what do they tell us, why do they exist, et cetera, kind of that background knowledge. And then the next month, I might break people into teams and do some self-assessment once people have a better understanding of that. And then after that, I met over the course of 3 more months with my leadership team. And again, that was after school, in an hour and a half to 2-hour session with the leaders from each of the various grade levels in the school. And that team, over the course of that few months, was able to prioritize looking at all the strands together. And of course, they already knew what our school improvement plan said, where things that we had identified in our self-assessment would mix in with the assessment that we had done on the guiding principles. And then it took about 2 more months, 2 more sessions with our school improvement team. And our school improvement team meets once a month. And so, month one, we kind of said, here's where we are. This is what we're proposing to you as integration of school improvement plan changes. And then the next month, after they had time to kind of digest, ask questions, speak to their constituents, come back, then the next month they were able to vote on the actionable items, make any changes that we wanted to make before they were finalized into our school improvement plan. So I would say that over the course of a school year, having a dedicated hour and a half to 2 hours to assess, prioritize, action plan, and then monitor, just like you would with your regular school improvement plan. And when we do our school improvement plans, at least in the process for focus schools, or I'm sure the TSI schools now they're called, then I think they even have a new name now, TSA maybe. But anyway, in looking at that process, you're really, when you do your needs assessment, this is a piece of the needs assessment. And in dual language schools, this is a really important piece, because if you only do needs assessment that a traditional school would be using, you're missing all of the components that make dual language, and you still have to do the needs assessment that includes things like attendance and your test scores and parent feedback and all those other pieces. But an important piece of dual language programming are the guiding principles and where you are with guiding principles, and you can't have one without the other. You have to have both. And so if you're thinking about where you are in your school improvement planning cycle, I would really be encouraging you to think about how you might integrate and have the guiding principles be a piece of that needs assessment and action planning that you use for your school. I think I answered that question, Ivana. I will just say that, and echo what Ivana had said, if you have specific questions that didn't get answered, I will try to answer the questions as they come back in at the end of this webinar, and then hopefully they can get posted back out. But if you have specific questions or want to talk further about the process or dual language things specific, please feel free to email and ask. I am always open to brainstorm and talk about and learn together with someone related to, their dual language journey. So don't be afraid to reach out.
And we do have several people talking about the book, some who haven't used the book but are really looking forward to it after hearing you speak, some who have used the book and are talking about how helpful it has been. There's a lot of really specific questions for you, such as, how did you choose to shift to immersion, or what's the best way to do cultural exchanges? How can I get a hold of your curriculum? So lots of questions that I think will be really good for you to go through offline. And there were several questions again about the links to the CAL guide, the CAL resources, and the DLI web pages. If you'll look in your questions box, the question chat box, Anne Marie has been adding those links over there. And while I'm trying to scroll through the questions,
I'll just jump in for a moment. Ivana is correct. I've added the link that goes directly to the web page at Cal that has the guiding principles for dual languages 3rd edition. As we discussed, you need to register for that to download your free copy of the PDF, so you can do that. I also added in there a link to our DLI website resources page that has actually several things from Cal listed on it and other organizations that provide materials and resources for DLI programs. So you can go directly there too and get to the Cal information. In addition, I have also posted a link to our DLI webinar series page. Several people have been asking in the question box where you get a copy of these slides and this webinar broadcast, and it will all be posted on that webinar series page. Just so you know, you'll get a follow-up email from us today too, and it should have a link to that webinar series page as well. We don't have a lot of time left, but as Ivana said, we do in fact get all of your questions, and if there are things we need to follow up and answer, we will definitely do that. I think if we could, we'll just kind of move on to the rest of our materials here. If you can stay on, we'd love for you to do that. If you do have to go, we understand, but we have a few other things to share with you today before we close out our broadcast. We would like to, of course, start by thanking Dr. Bivens for sharing all of this wonderful experience and expertise with us. She's really done quite a lot in the different DLI programs she's worked with in her district and over time, and we appreciate her insight and guidance on this.
Happy to be here. Thank you guys for inviting me.
All right. So let's go ahead and finish out for today. We wanted to share with you that there's some upcoming professional developments you may want to put on your calendar. The FLANC Fall Conference is coming up. FLANC is the Foreign Language Association of North Carolina. It is our professional home as DLI educators in North Carolina. So their fall conference will be October 9th and 10th in Winston-Salem. There's several different options there. There'll be some pre-conference webinars. There'll be 2 days of 50-minute concurrent sessions. There'll be research roundtables, and there'll be 3-hour workshops that you can sign up for. You can see there on the left hand or on the right hand side, the theme this year is hindsight is FLANC 2020 and talking about how far we've come. So all of the presenters will be focused on that idea. Registration for the conference does open on May 15th at the link you see there on the screen. Also, that anytime there are links on the screen, we also have them in the notes section of the slides. So if you download the slide set, you can always get that directly afterwards. Given the situation we're dealing with currently, I will also let you know that the FLANC board is considering virtual options or a blended opportunity approach for their fall conference. The hope is that we will all be face-to-face in October for the FLANC Fall Conference, but you never know, and so they are planning for some other possibilities if needed. All right, we also have some updates to share with you from a state perspective, a regional perspective, and the national perspective. First, we want to share with you about the DLI book study series. We are today officially releasing the self-paced Canvas course for the book you see there, Educating English Learners for a Transformed World. This is the first book in the Thomas and Collier series, and you may have heard us talk about this before because we've been working on this. We actually offer this as an instructor-led course in the fall, and now it's available to you in our NESIS professional development system. Instructions for enrolling in this self-paced course, which earns you 1 CEU, are posted on the book studies page under the professional development tab on our NCDPI website. And this is just a quick look at what that is. And as I said, all of these links work directly from this slide, and you can find this information on our DLI website for the state. Going forward, of course, we'll have our DLI book study for the blue book, the first book here, but also this fall, we will be offering an instructor-led version of the book study for the second book, affectionately called the Red Book, but titled Dual Language Education for a Transformed World. This is the second in the series by Thomas and Collier research team, if you will. And this book also contains a chapter dedicated to the work here in North Carolina called Outstanding Success and all the things we've done with DLI here. Also, there are 3 other books in this series that you might well be aware of, and there are plans to make those into book studies in the future. So stay tuned and do take a look at what's on our book studies page on the website to get more information and details. Also, as part of the crisis situation that we're dealing with here, we have created a website and a series of pages about teaching world languages remotely. I want to bring it to your attention that it does have a bit.ly link, as you see there, bit.ly/teachwlremote, and 3 different spaces, technology resources for teaching world languages online, multilingual resources, and language-specific resources. For DLI specifically, under the multilingual resources link, there's a whole section on working with elementary students, including DLI. And so I wanted to bring that to your attention in case you're looking for resources like that. These materials are posted from a national databank of resources for teaching world languages remotely. And there are a lot of things that could be used in DLI programs as well as any type of world language program. In addition, we wanted to bring your attention to a regional opportunity coming up. SCOLT, the Southern Conference on Language Teaching, our regional organization, has just announced when their 2021 conference will be, and it'll be March 18th to the 20th in Atlanta, Georgia, so not very far away from us. Their theme is Language Through an Unfiltered Lens, and proposals for that particular conference are due on September 1st of this year, so there's some time to think about that. They always do their proposal forms online, and you can get more information about the SCOLT conference by going to scolt.org/conferences. I'm also seeing some notes in the questions box, actually from the executive director of SCOLT, our own Dr. Leslie Baldwin from North Carolina. And she's sharing, as you may be well aware of, that SCOLT is offering some webinars for teachers, particularly Spanish teachers, but other teachers as well, to help get through this time and focusing on remote learning and what you need to do to really sharpen your skills as you do that.
And I did post that in the chat for everyone to see.
Excellent. Webinars like that, of course, are always posted online as well and included in things like our listserv announcements that you probably have already been getting. All right. Well, speaking of professional development opportunities, now we're going to move to the national level. The ACTFL Convention, the American Council on the Teaching of Foreign Languages, our national professional organization, is planning their conference this fall. It's always in November, from November 20th to the 22nd in San Antonio, Texas. The details are online, as you see, at actfl.org/convention-expo, and it includes information about their keynote speakers that they just announced this week, registration information, scholarships if you want to attend the conference, and so on. In addition, I want to bring your attention to the Immersion SIG, or what's called a special interest group at ACTFL. The SIGs provide networking and sharing on a specific topic, and there is an Immersion SIG that you may be interested in if you're not already involved. ACTFL Basic membership includes 1 free SIG, and I wanted to make you aware that a free 1-year basic membership is available to any new member to ACTFL who joins through June 30th of this year. That is part of ACTFL's resources in response to COVID-19, and again, all the links for that are included on this slide and will be shared. So something to keep in mind if you're looking for professional development opportunities, and specifically ones related to immersion. All right, well, that was a lot of information in a very short period of time, but let's go ahead and think about which of the update items that we just talked about will you use or share before Friday of this week. And remember, Friday is officially May 1st, so we're going to start a new month. So you can check all that apply. Ivana has got our poll up, so just let us know which one you're going to use or share before Friday. All right, let's get all of our votes in.
We've stalled out at 79%, so I'm going to close it.
All right. And it looks like there's a lot of things you're going to share, starting with that Teaching World Languages Remotely webpage, but also the DLI book study information. It is self-paced now. You can just enroll yourself. We also are going to share the Flank Fall Conference information, as well as the Scope Conference call for proposals and the actual information as well. So it looks like everything's being passed along, and that's great. We do want to keep you informed of all the professional development opportunities that are available to you. We know that sometimes, particularly if things are online like webinars or book studies, this is a really good time to get started in those kinds of opportunities as we move through this part of the school year, but also into the summer and beyond. All right, well, let's finish out. One way, oops, there we go. One way to make sure you stay up to date about all of those professional development opportunities, whether they're coming from us at DPI or from one of the professional organizations or a group like NC Virtual that also offers webinars and things for teachers, is to make sure you subscribe to our listservs. Keep in mind, we do have a listserv especially for DLI educators, as it says there, but there are also other world language listservs and other listservs in general for folks who are in charter schools, who are interested in global education, who want legislative updates. Keep in mind, our state legislature just reconvened today, or for teachers of English learners or others. So there's lots of opportunities there to get information about the work you do in schools and with students. We do have a bit.ly link to sign up for any of those DPI updates or listservs at bit.ly/NCDPI updates. Quick reminder too, information from this webinar, like an article summarizing everything that you've learned today, will be included in our DLI Discourse magazine. It's posted on the DLI website under the Resources tab, and we have articles about standards, instruction, leadership, a principals blog, professional learning, as I said, from our DLI quarterly webinars, and then other things like spotlights on schools and programs. So be sure and check there too, and look for listserv announcements leading you to those articles and that information. That's it for today. We always like to finish with a picture of our DLI team, as you can see here. Both Ivana and I are posted there as leads. You can contact either one of us for further information, or both of us at the same time. Also, our DLI website for the state is at bit.ly/NCDLI site. We do thank you. We know everyone is very busy during this time of the year and with the situation we're dealing with, but we enjoy having you online with us. We'll go ahead and stop our recording, but if there are any additional individual questions we need to attend to, we can do that.